it's because I've been trained when I was a child, if we want to say it that way, because this is not exactly I've been trained. It's more like I was looking at my mom reading cards, and then I started to do the same on my own. And funny things started to be read. Like then finally we could tell that works sometimes it doesn't work. So if I'm going to do a reading tonight, sorry, for me it's night again. So then don't forget one thing. Those are just playing cards, okay? Nothing to take too seriously, nothing to either believe it's not true, like who knows? And we'll see if cards are well read, or maybe they will say nothing. Okay?
I see that Anne Heinen would like her cards read. Maureen, are you down to do that?
Sorry?
In the chat, one of our guests, Anne Heinen, would like her cards read. Are you willing to?
If you want.
Yeah.
Yes, sure. Can we hear her question?
Oh, how fun. There's a lot of people here. How exciting.
So
I don't see the number and I prefer not.
Hi, this is Anne. What, can you give me some hints about kinds of questions to ask?
So it's up to you. If you want to ask a question, like, of course, it's more like a question you should then worry about. Like, if you ask me something very pointy, like which day I will go in this place, and then I will be like, well, this is not like cats can tell us that. It's more answers that could come with more explanations, like that could come with less pointy, you know what I mean? Like it could be yes or no, and the card will let us know if you also able to hear the answer. Because me, for example, it happened many times that my cards never replied me as I wanted it. Like they would try to avoid the subject, you know.
Okay, so like less specific questions. So like, what would be a good
will
example?
I be happy? Will I find career success? That kind of thing?
For example, yeah, I think.
Okay. I know that's kind of vague, but you know.
You know what? Maybe I'm going to think about it for just a couple of minutes. Okay.
Okay.
Sure. And I'll just put it in the chat. I'll put it in the chat box when I've thought of something.
Okay, perfect. And that goes for everyone too. If you want to do that, I'm looking at the chat box. So just write down if you would. And like Maureen, you can talk about Père Lachaise if you want to, like introduce everyone to this. It's one of the largest cemeteries in Paris in the world, like one of the most historic. So yeah.
All right. Yes, indeed. I wanted to talk about Père Lachaise because it's pretty well linked with cards. First of all, you have one famous woman buried there called Mademoiselle Lenormand. And Mademoiselle Lenormand used to be what we call a Sibyl. So have you already heard of that word, Sibyl?
No.
So a Sibyl is actually a person, especially like even in antiquity, we used to have already Sibyl. There were women, mostly old women, sometimes even blind, who would tell a fortune, who would read in bones, or it could be in food, or it was to tell future. So Mademoiselle Lenormand used to be one of the Sibyl from the end of 18th century. So at time of French Revolution and at time of big, great movement, you know, in France, as you may know. So she was very famous in Paris because many famous people like Robespierre, Danton, and later Napoleon went to have reading by her. So they discovered things like they didn't want to hear about, like, you know, now the history, like all of them were mostly beheaded, or Napoleon, for example, had the end of the empire and he didn't want to hear that. So anytime that she would say something like that, she wasn't really beloved. So they decided to place her in prison. So she went in prison several times. She even had to run away from France. She was shown as a fake when she was, though, telling future of people with bad end.
Oh, they only wanted to hear the good things, basically, as well.
Yeah.
Of course. But Lenormand
sure,
was
don't we all?
Lenormand was a straight woman. Like she would go for the real explanation. She wouldn't go around like me. I'm nice.
Just be tactful and then deliver the bad news.
Yeah. If it's
So
bad, just be like, you're gonna get a dog. It's gonna be fine.
Puppies, everybody loves puppies.
Yeah. So here you have, if I can show it to you, yes, you have one Lenormand game deck of cards. They are based, like you see, on regular cards. Can you see that? You have the regular cards here on the corner, and then you have some explanation here and another drawing. You have to know that Lenormand never asked to do a deck of cards for her. It's because when she died, actually they stole her deck and sold it and used all the inscriptions she made on a deck of cards like this, so a regular one. She used to write a lot on her deck of cards, and they used it and sold it. So now if you see a Lenormand deck, just consider that used to be made by someone who stole, a thief, in fact.
Wow. So they thought she was a fake, but they stole her cards. That's so typical.
Typical, yes. If you don't like something, steal it for yourself.
In the chat, Maureen, oh, sorry. Gosh, sorry. In the chat, Lynn McKinnon is saying, is there a way to ask in tarot how long this COVID situation will be dominating our lives?
We can try.
Okay.
I don't promise 100% efficiency of it, but I can try that. As I mentioned, sometimes cards would not tell things because we are not ready to hear it. Sometimes also cards, I really, oh, by the way, I forgot one thing, to switch on my essential oil to get the good...
Ooh, that looks so mysterious. She just reached behind the veil of shadows and pulled it out. That was cool. Yeah, it was totally spooky. I agree. I like that.
Yeah, we promise spooky.
So I will try to answer this question, Lynn, okay? So is there a way to ask in tarot how long the COVID situation will be dominating our lives? So the question is then, how long is it still going on? Like, if it makes sense, yes? So
Yeah,
how
that makes
long
sense.
could the situation? Okay, thank you. So I need to concentrate.
She's deep in thought.
It takes a powerful force.
Seriously,
to
yeah,
do, I imagine.
She's serious. How do you say that in French? Sérieux?
Ouais.
Serious.
Yeah, very serious. C'est sérieux.
Or like, c'est grave.
C'est grave. Oh, c'est grave.
Okay. So I hope I will concentrate it. You have to know it's the first time I'm doing a card reading in live. Okay, I'm not like the expert on TV or anything like this. Usually I do it only for friends, or so it's mostly for friends actually. So okay. So the question was, is the COVID situation will be dominating our lives, or is it still going on long? That's the same meaning. So I think to sum up, I think the idea is that we will get some very surprise news, not necessarily bad, but something that will maybe shock people. So the idea is, first of all, we were quite happy living in harmony, if we want to say that. Then we managed to get back to our family simple life, if I can mention it that way, like the fact to be all together, kind of solidarity, you know, that explodes as well, but also the fact that we had to come back to the simple, the essential of life. So then we see there are duels with men, like government, but also justice. Something quite a rivalry in between these two men, like normally in the playing cards, this is that way, but I believe those are the governors and the justice. So they will have to bring some explanations in there. And then things will change. Things will change. So I think regarding the COVID situation, this is not only about COVID, but now it's because all that happened. This is for sure that something will have to be changed. And then there will be, as I mentioned, some things that will shock people. Like when I say shock, it's not necessarily like what, or no, it's more like that will mark people, like they will remember that it's very strong thing. So something that fall on us, like we normally call fate, the fate, you know. And the fate is that we hope it is for good. So normally we should forget about what used to be before, because it can't come back to a normal, but we should have some kind of big something else. Okay? So
Okay. Well,
that was my
sense.
reading. It's a bit difficult to me, but if you want, we can try. My pleasure. So I just read a question. Yes, this is the entrance of Père Lachaise. You see, I managed to go there. There are no policemen around. So yes, it's a main entrance. It's a picture taken in 1900. It's a postal card. That's why there are things written. Yes, in France, you can see things written in the sky. So it's indeed one picture I've taken here. Well, not by me, I mean, taken to place behind me. So then, Tracy, did you read that?
I'm sorry, I'm gonna get right to the point. I want to know, like, what are the most, maybe I would say not most well-known, because I could probably figure that out on my own, but like just sightings of, do people regularly see, apparitions? Was it phantasm? Phantasm? How did you say that? Phantasm?
It's like fantasy. Phantasm.
Oh,
like
phantasm.
Like phantom? Phantom, like a ghost?
Phantom, yes, you mean ghost.
Phantom.
Yes,
like
that's what,
I mean, of
stories.
course, that's the cool, creepy stuff I want to know about.
Maureen, are there any like ghost sightings in Père Lachaise? Is it known for that?
Yes, it's quite famous for that. Let me show you one thing. Let me show you one thing. So I have to prepare the photo I want to show you, and I think it might be interesting for you to hear about that.
Also, my mom's asking if I'm in front of Oscar Wilde's grave. That's a yes. It's Oscar Wilde's grave, and there's kisses all over it.
Oh.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Oh wow. Yes. Okay. Oh shoot. Yeah. That's cool.
Wait, I'm not seeing it.
Look in between the markers. He's like yeah.
Oh my God.
It's called an Assyrian. It's called an Assyrian bull. No, a taureau, taureau Assyrian. So an Assyrian. How would you say taureau?
Taureau? I'm not sure actually. Like little boy? Taureau?
Bull. No, bull. I think it's bull. No, the animal, like the cow man.
Oh, yeah, I know what you're saying. Like an ox?
Yeah, I believe it is. So,
right?
the sculpture behind you, made by a text, is actually an Assyrian, how did you say, ox?
Like, yes, an ox. Like, yes. Exactly.
So, and he's got wings, because then it's kind of the meaning of the freedom of Oscar Wilde. But you have to know that Oscar Wilde used to be buried in a terrible grave, and not in Père Lachaise before. And this is his friends who worked hard to bring him in Père Lachaise, and to also erect this gorgeous grave, which is full of meanings. This is the eternal life, and also, yeah. Also representing Oscar Wilde's face, by the way.
Was he buried in England first?
No, he was buried in the suburb of Paris, in like, you have normally 7 ways to bury people, and he was buried on the 6th one, which means that he was buried it's just before the common grave. Actually, the 7th is a common grave.
Oh.
So it's very misery and pity grave that he was buried in. So that's why then his friend worked hard to bring his body in Père Lachaise and to provide for the grave. He died, he didn't earn any more money. He was spending all his money in bad things. And apparently the last word he would have said is that, is this wallpaper going away or is it me? Because he died in such a terrible place, like everything was falling apart, that he was kind of making something like in common with the place he is in, because he was also dying. So that's double.
Those are some pretty epic last words, though, I will say.
Yeah.
Wow.
I know that to get into Père Lachaise, you have to sort of buy the plot or rent it out, like it's an apartment or something, and that Oscar Wilde is there permanently. Do you know how he got, like, his friend got the money to, I guess, make him there permanently, or how much it costs to do that? Or is it just because he's famous?
Yeah, it's part of it. Actually, it's
Okay.
all the friend who asked for the rights at the city hall. You know, you have certain rights for certain people. So he's one of them. And
Okay.
yeah, it's the public,
Okay.
the public matter. So that's why then he could have his grave. Yeah.
I do know someone that knew someone that his cremains were scattered like in an area next to either a chapel or something like that. So even if you can't be buried there or you can't be interred there, you can actually have your cremains scattered there.
Yeah, I visited Père Lachaise with my family, and we met this sort of eccentric tour guide that I talked to Marine about earlier, and she actually has met him before. He showed us that as well. Like at Edith Piaf's grave, there were tons of like ashes in the plot around her, like in the dirt. It was kind of weird. But I don't think that's legal.
Oh, well, no, I think, well, that's even more, that's like, yeah, super rock star. I'm down for that. That's like, it sounds.
Do you see the picture? Or
yeah, speaking of rock star, is that who I think it might be?
So let me check. I don't see.
I see it on my screen.
Let me show you it again to make sure you think, oh yes, that was a good one. So then here you might notify the name written on the grave at the feet of the man taken on photos. So the man is one who is a critical, he's a rock critical, he's also a rock historian. And he decided to come and visit his one of his star, like Jim Morrison. Jim Morrison is buried in Père Lachaise, and the way he died is still controversial because all was explained as he died in his bath, which is wrong. I
didn't know that.
He died actually in the toilets of a club in Paris.
Oh no!
Yeah, that's not
how he died in the movie. Oh.
Ah, not on the toilet. No.
That's so bad.
Oh, that's very Elvis. I mean, Elvis can get away with it, but
yeah. And then the owner of the club asked his girlfriend at the moment to bring the body to their flat or to their hotel to pretend that happened there.
Oh my God.
Scandal.
That's so awful. So, that's probably the worst way to die.
On the toilet.
Yes, he died of overdose when you're taking too much drugs.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very Jim Morrison.
He tried heroin. And
so yeah, that's definitely, I mean, that image behind the markers, the grave markers, that, I mean, that you could, I can't even read them. I can't read the gravestone. I can't read the marker, but I could sure see him standing there, you know.
You see that.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It's been such a story, you know, in the 90s. I remember that well when I was a kid. It was on TV and all. Actually, Brennett, the man you see on the photo, decided to, because, you know, it wasn't like a numeric photos. They were all taken in advance, and then you had to come back home to develop the photo to have them. So I'm sorry, I've got something in the throat.
Jim's saying, don't you tell people that I died on the toilet. He's trying to shush you.
Yes, exactly, yes. So then what happened is that he discovered this strange shadow on his photo, and he decided to mention it to people. So it was published in newspapers, but then we had like experts who wanted to check the pictures closer to check if it was a fake or a real one. And no one was able to mention it was a fake. So then we can recognize indeed the shadow of Jim Morrison, who used to stand like this. If I can show you that photo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, with shirtless, with his hot pants, his leather hot pants on for sure. Oh wow.
So
oh, wow.
Yeah, that's one of very important facts that happen in Père Lachaise. But of course, you know, if you ever go there, now the grave of Jim Morrison is enclosed by barriers to avoid that people stand too close to it, because they all damaging the grave, not only of Jim Morrison, but also the neighbor's one. So it's breaking everything in this area. So that's why they added the barriers. And you also have a big tree just in front of it, where you can stick all your chewing gums.
Why did people start doing that? I did a blog post about this on the Experience First blog, and I read that and I was like, why is this a tradition to ruin the graves like this?
I never figured that out. Actually,
I've got one word: humans. There you go. If we're involved, we're gonna do something like stick gum on a grave.
So I believe it is because rock stars are like, you know, always chewing something, like, you know, to look cool.
Oh yeah.
So I think. And also in France, there is a funny thing with chewing gums, because this is American. After the Second World War, when they free France, they bring with them chewing gums and started to distribute them to people, to give them to people, and that's how it became famous here.
That makes actually a lot of sense.
Maybe also because he's an American.
Yeah, gum is still not big here. Chewing gum's still not very big here, but maybe we could open a chewing gum kiosk out at Père Lachaise.
Maybe, yeah.
That's
yeah.
Yeah.
It just has his photo on it. Stick this on Jim Morrison. Stick
That's
it on Oscar Wilde. Stick your ashes on this one.
Yes. I went to Père Lachaise not that long ago. It was like one of my first visits here, and we couldn't find it. We looked around, you know, you're just going up. It's an amazing place. Just keep going and up, and it's beautiful. I mean, you really can spend a lot of time there, you know.
But like explained Madeleine earlier, indeed it's the biggest cemetery in Paris, but this is also the biggest green area in Paris. It's to tell you
I didn't know that.
We are with nature in the big city, but still, this is, I think it's around 40 hectares, so it's quite huge.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
And in there, you also had the story of the place, the history of place. Like you see, it used to be this entrance has been added in the 19th century, but before, this location used to be a house, what we call a folie. Folie, which could be also translated by crazy.
Crazy, right?
But a folie, it's more also like for a house, it's more like a second house, like a mansion. So that used to be a mansion. Then it became the Jesuit house. So, you know, Jesuits, they are like a team of priests, and they usually are communities, and their beliefs is not to own something, like one thing would belong to everybody. It's a very sharey way of seeing things. So the house was not belonging to one man only, it was belonging to a community of Jesuits. And the man quite famous of this community was Saint François d'Aix de la Chaise, Saint Francis d'Aix of the Chaise, if I want to translate.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that's a mouthful.
So chaise in French is quite funny because chaise means chair, and it's also the one normally who is superior. So in very old French. So then Saint François d'Aix de la Chaise is famous for one good thing. He used to be the man who was, well, the priest who was always talking with Louis XIV. If Louis XIV wanted to talk to someone from the church, he would go and see Saint François d'Aix de la Chaise. So Louis XIV came quite often here to visit his confessor, so to confess, you know, confessor.
Yeah.
He's the one who married Louis XIV and his last wife. So it was a secret wedding that happened in Versailles, and nobody heard about it. It was very secret because as he already lost his first wife, he didn't want to that people would hear about this wedding, especially that Madame de Maintenon was not very well welcomed because she wasn't from the high society. So
that would have burned up the internet back then. Woo!
Yeah,
that would have been a secret for very long. Yeah. I love this gossip. All this is good gossip.
Yeah.
Paris is like has like the best gossip ever.
Has anyone ever been murdered in Père Lachaise? Because like when I visited there, I just kept having this feeling of like people, because the tour guide that we went with, he just popped out from behind a gravestone. So like I'm sure at night weird things happen there.
Yes, and he's the one who made it. He looks so creepy. I like him. I like him in a way. He is,
you say that with much affection, I'm sure.
Yeah.
He's not watching either right now. I don't think so, you know.
No, but I like him, really. I really like him because I like people who are crazy. So I think he's crazy. That's why I like him.
Yeah.
My mom is asking about the Oscar Wilde grave. She's saying, tell us about the Oscar Wilde grave. We already told you, Mom.
She's calling you out.
I will re-explain.
Yeah, we already talked about this. He wasn't buried here before. His friend got him here.
But I will explain.
The lip prints.
It's more. So first of all, what was your question again, Madeleine? Because you asked me a question.
I asked if anyone has been murdered in Père Lachaise.
Right. So there is a terrible event that happened in 1871, actually during what we call the Bloody Week. So bloody for the blood that fell this day, this week, sorry. So it was in May. So normally there are celebrations in Père Lachaise for that particular event, because at the end of this week, after that Versailles killed mostly of the low class in Paris, they went to Père Lachaise and they realized there were still those protesters hidden in the cemetery. They even hide some artilleries in the graves. They would be hidden in mausoleums. So, right. And Versailles, the governors, like the one who were meant to control the city, who couldn't control them anymore, decided to enter the cemetery with the help of German soldiers, because it was right after a war with them. So they were helping each other against the protesters in Paris. So they went there and they shot everybody.
Oh my God. I don't know why I asked this. I like murder stories, but oh my God, that's awful.
Well, it was a long, long time ago, so it's you know,
yeah,
not soon, but still.
Just
quickly, gosh.
That's a lot of people.
And this funny story, well, funny, awkward story, then actually managed to catch 147 men. And there were not only men, actually, there were children as well in there.
Oh no.
And they asked them to stand all along a wall, which is in one side of the Père Lachaise, still there. And they shot all of them. The 147 men all along this wall. And now, as a remembering thing, we have only one plaque on this wall mentioning that quickly, like very briefly, and nothing else. We never
wow. Mic drop.
Yeah, that basically, very nice.
Yeah, oh my God. I feel like that's something Père Lachaise doesn't want you to know, because whenever I look at Père Lachaise, like, oh, the famous graves, oh, blah, blah, but never information about how they murdered people there. Wow. That's awful.
Would you like one of my strange stories?
Yes, of course. Of kills.
So 5 years ago or 4 years ago, I was hanging around Père Lachaise, and I decided then to write a visit about Père Lachaise. So for that, I had to visit it again and again to make sure I would know by heart the place. So I went there one morning, my baby monster, to my parents. So then it was 4 years ago. She was really a tiny baby. And I went there. I was alone. And I entered the cemetery by a small door, because you have this main entrance. But if you go there, you will notice also a very small entrance at the end of this wall, another one hidden over there, and two in the other side of the cemetery. So I went by this entrance, the one over here, and I entered the place, and I was looking at the map with all the list of people buried there. And I felt like, man, by what should I start? And I said, well, just take a path and walk around and enjoy your day. So I went, I started to walk, and then I decided to ask, well, what is a better place than a cemetery to ask if there are spirits around us? So I started and I asked, well, if you will run me, then give me a sign. And I went on, walked slowly. Then I felt like a small wind. And I was surprised, because it was a regular day and there was no wind from the morning. And I felt something awkward in the atmosphere. So then I started to think, that might be the sign, but where is it? So I went on. and suddenly the wind pushed stronger. So I stopped and I looked around me, and there was another alley, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I look at the alley and I look at the grave behind me, and there was something very stupid written on this, like a stupid graffiti mentioning that we are stupid people, whatever. And I said, thank you for the sign, it's very nice. And then the wind pushed again. Oh, so then this is not that. Okay. I took the alley, and then the wind stopped drastically, like there was no wind at all. And I feel, okay, so this is here, but where is it? So I looked around me. There was nothing. So I was like, what is it? What should I see? So I started to think maybe it's written. So I looked on the graves, the name of people, and I saw nothing. So I was about to go back to where I was, and I turned, and I was just in front of a huge grave from the 30s, like the typical Art Deco grave, with my family name.
Oh, shoot.
There.
Oh,
I
shoot.
can't.
Oh, that's awesome.
What?
Oh, man.
Did you know your family was buried there? Is it like a typical, what's your last name? Oh, God.
Right?
So my family name is Bonnet, Bonnet.
Okay.
Then they are quite, we are spread in France. Like I love to say, my grandpa did a lot of children, and we kind of rebuild the territory. But
But there are a lot of graves in Père Lachaise. So for you to actually wind up there.
Yeah, that's
cool.
crazy.
That's why I was so like,
oh my gosh.
I couldn't make it better as a sign.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I would have, I don't know if I would have returned. I would have been like, this place is too spooky for me. Oh
No,
my
I
God.
felt it was very warm. I
Yeah,
thought it was very like welcoming.
Mm. Yeah,
Yes.
that's really cool.
I can imagine. Oh wow. That was your cheek kiss from your ancestors. Oh wow, that's awesome.
So maybe someone wants a card reading. No.
Does anyone?
Oh, sorry, Madeleine. I need to answer your mother, otherwise she might. End...
She was asking about the lip prints on the gravestones. So that probably goes for Oscar Wilde and for Jim Morrison if it's the same people doing that.
So regarding, yes, maybe the same fans, you mean? Yeah. Actually, those lipsticks are not visible that way anymore, because the grave has been protected by a big glass, wall of glass, to make sure people would stop that. So
just like the Eiffel Tower, they just keep putting glass around everything.
So people stop kissing the Eiffel Tower.
Yes.
Awkward people, you know.
My favorite kind.
It's like once in the catacombs, we saw these lipsticks on one skull.
Oh no, really? Oh yeah. My gosh.
These crazy tourists who kiss everything.
I know. So actually, lipsticks, we believe it's because Oscar Wilde is known and famous to be gay. And he is a kind of pilgrim place, a pilgrimage place.
Oh yeah, pilgrimage. Yeah.
To welcome all the community of lesbians and gays and all. So as we call in French, LGBT.
Oh yeah, it's the same in English as well.
We had a Q and an I and an A now on the end of it too. We're gonna just do the whole alphabet. Like,
Yeah.
The
Just
ABC.
everyone.
So it was indeed one ritual when visiting Oscar Wilde's grave to kiss his grave. It was kind of kissing him to say hi and also to leave a stain of our passage.
Mm.
But it has it stopped, and because of this wall now, the grave just next to Oscar Wilde is broken because people were standing on it to go all the way up this wall of glass to kiss the stone.
They're like, I came all the way here. I'm kissing it.
I'm going to do it.
Do people at least kiss the glass now, maybe? Do they? I mean, you can kiss the glass. That's not going to get ruined.
You can clean it. So it's not enough.
It's not the same. What if you fall into the glass, though, and you're just with the grave? You're just trapped with Oscar Wilde.
I could think of worse people to be trapped with, some alive ones that are actually probably worse trapped with.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I don't know, what time do we end? Because I want to make sure that, because I know we're going over, and I don't know if something just cuts off. I think sometimes they just cut it off. I'm happy that it's not.
Yeah.
They didn't cut
Sorry,
it off.
I was so interested. I didn't
No,
see
I
what
know.
time it was. But yeah, I guess Zoom cuts you off.
I just want to make sure that doesn't happen, because
yeah.
I don't want to like share all these great stories.
Yes.
Anyway.
Do you have any like last before Zoom cuts anything off, in case that's a thing? Do you have any last remarks about Père Lachaise that you want to say, like any facts or anything?
So one could be very interesting is about the grave of Allan Kardec. Allan Kardec is a famous man here in France, but the new generation, unfortunately, do not know so much about him. Allan Kardec is born in 1804, and he was educated with Rousseau way of life, which means more based on experience than on working at school, which is, I think, nowadays everybody would say, indeed, much better.
Yeah.
So he was very intelligent. His real name is Hippolyte Rivail, and he started to work as a teacher, and he was quite famous. He wrote many books under his real name. And then he was requested at the age of 51 to organize a seance. So, you know, seance is talking to death. So the idea was he would be the one in charge with this seance, and to ask questions to the spirits. And he was really into it, even though before he wrote many stuff about superstitions, how much it's bad. But anyway, he took part of this, and he went to meet one of his guides, because you have guides also in the other side. So you see, I've got another possibility for afterwards.
Is it on your resume?
Exactly, I should add it. So he saw his guide, and his guide mentioned that he used to be a druid in one of his past life. He was a druid called Allan Kardec, and he was helping people like the Gallic people, his small tribe. So then when he came back to the normal life, then he mentioned that, and he decided to call himself Allan Kardec. Anytime he would talk about seance or spiritism. And he is the one who used the concept of the word spirit in French, because also in French we would say spiritisme. So we're using the English word for spirit, which means esprit in French, and to talk about this movement, this new movement of talking with dead. And he wrote 5 books, which is known to be the 5 books fondators of this movement. And I've got one of those. The other ones that are at my parents. So it's one book he wrote. I don't know if you can see it. It's
You
terrible.
go back and then hold it. Yes. Le livre des esprits. Oh. Ooh.
He wrote also the Medium's book. This one is a spirit's book. And he's explaining how that works, the seance, and how to communicate with them and how that should happen. And he also started to publish one newspapers or magazine that is called La Revue Spirit, the Spirit Review. And that's still printed nowadays.
Wow.
Oh, that sounds cool.
That's so cool.
Cool.
Allan Kardec is the most famous nowadays, even not in France, but in Brazil. So in Brazil, they would know by heart who is Allan Kardec. In France, we start of forgetting about him.
Hmm.
Oh, he sounds actually.
Thank you, Maureen. That's so
Revival.
cool.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Maureen, for today. Thank you, Tracy. We'll see you next week for more spooky, scary
Oh
stories.
no, tomorrow I have one in the Marais. I'm going to do a live tour out and about in the Marais.
Oh yeah, that's true.
7 Paris time, and I'm working on having a very cool guide with me, but we'll see. He said he wasn't feeling so well, so I don't want to push it. But and then on Sunday, I think we have something going on too. So make sure everybody stays in touch with exp1.com and keep up on all the different events coming up. I know we're going to really be building. I think Linda has one. I think they have one tomorrow too. New York, a New York based one.
Yes, and we actually need to cut the Zoom now because I think they need it the same account or something. So
okay.
Thank you guys so much.
Can I add one thing? Because I see Kathy asking me the top 3